Hello all, I'm going to be re-recording my talk I just did about an hour ago. I forgot to press the record button, therefore I'm going to do it all over again. Um, so bear with me. Let me start off by saying that because the talk is on freedom of speech, I'd like to straight away begin by saying that there are two events that are taking place right now as of this moment. One is the elections of in Pakistan, and the other one is the Tucker Carlson interview of Putin. Now, both these have generated a lot of interest in in the world, and why? Because Tucker Carlson is going to be interviewing Putin, who is, of course, the arch enemy of the West, and they don't want to hear anything good about him or even his narrative. But Tucker Carlson has been given the opportunity to interview him, and he's there in Moscow, and he has done the interview, and that interview is going to be uh, put out on some of these media. Already, the media, the Western media, has said very anti sort of comments about this interview as being the complicit with Putin in uh, in the war that is taking place in Ukraine, and also equating him with Julian Assange, who also was very much instrumental in bringing out the criminality of USA in Iraq. So you can see the freedom of speech when it comes to really hearing the other side doesn't exist in the West. So it's very important for you to be able to know that. So Elon Musk has said he's going to put that interview onto X. I doubt anybody else is going to be doing that. So if it does get put on the X or the old Twitter, then do get to see it, as to see what it is that Putin is saying. Because all that we hear about Ukraine is all lies. And if for further information on Ukraine, listen to Colonel Douglas McGregor on YouTube. He used to be the former defense advisor and a very, very knowledgeable person with good contacts. I'll talk more about this in my presentation. And the other question which is happening today is the election in Pakistan. Now, Imran Khan has the support of 80% of the people in Pakistan. Now, he has been ousted by the complicity of USA with the local military and to bring in the mafia leader who has been ruled as criminal because of his Panama links and also because of all his crooked dealings and looting the country. He's been put back. Now, why are these people being supported by USA? Because they are able to say yes to what the US wants to do. And Imran Khan said, no, I want to be neutral. I want to be friends with everybody, and I want to have an independent foreign policy. Now, that's not music to the ears of USA and UK. Therefore, they have been behind this complicity with the government in Pakistan, the corrupt government in Pakistan currently. Hopefully, today's election will determine whether Imran Khan will actually come to power or whether there's going to be a complete sort of rigging and declaring him as the loser. And we have seen already that they have gone to great lengths to try and demonizing him, putting him in jail, taking away his symbol of the bat, and putting all his party leaders in jail and not allowing him to have any rallies for election and so on and so forth. So you can see if the West on one side wants to talk about freedom of speech and democracy and so on, and the other side do these covert actions of not allowing free speech to be done by the person who is the most competent and supported by the country as a whole, and instead supporting the crooks that are in government, like the previous crooks who were in power, like in Egypt, in Baghdad, and all the other places, Libya, and what have you, and South America. 67 other country regime changes have taken place as well. More of that later. Okay, let me share some screens with you. Here we go. This is the freedom of speech presentation for my class, Mickey's class today. So let me go through that very quickly. So what am I going to be talking today? Well, first of all, freedom of speech is very closely linked to our ability to communicate. And if you listen to some of the evolutionary um, conditions that has made us into a society of today, is our power of narrative. The sapiens developed that narrative, power of narrative, and therefore have been able to overcome their difficulties with Neanderthals and so on in their times. Now that has led this narrative or the ability to create ideologies and stories and so on to our state of enlightenment and the institutions for checks and balances. I'll talk about that of the time of enlightenment. And then, of course, the amendment, First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that safeguards free speech. And then something about the mainstream media, BBC, CNN, and of course the banned ones, which is the radio, the Russian TV, the China TV, or the Iranian TV. Then talk about the social media, and of course paying heed to what Elon Musk is trying to do with Twitter in order to maintain at least some semblance of of if you like, credibility in the messaging that it puts out, which Google and Facebook and all that have given up on. And what are the challenges in maintaining that control of freedom of speech? And some big questions we need to also ask ourselves that are facing us, which don't get answered because the governments don't necessarily want answers to these because they are doing all covert operations. And it will probably be in the interest of them to continue to keep power if they don't tell people about it. So why is free speech important? So it's because it's a prerequisite to all our other freedoms, to living in a free society. Without freedom of speech, there is no preacher in the pulpit, no defense at the trial. Without freedom of speech, we cannot cast our vote or call representatives. So you can see our basis of society is free speech. Now, I'd like to take you back to our evolutionary times as to how we came about to what we are today. In fact, at the time when 200,000 years ago, there was a pivotal moment for whom we are as we consider ourselves to be sapiens. At that time, they had threats by Neanderthals who were bigger and who could have wiped the sapiens out. But the sapiens developed this narrative meaning that they were able to come together as a group of people and fend for themselves against the enemy. Neanderthals didn't have that capacity, so they got wiped out and they got beaten by sapiens. And sapiens, of course, from there onwards, because of the sense of narrative and speech, they developed their cognitive skills, and from there, it's a story that we see now. After having gone through the agricultural revolution, scientific revolution, and so on, we are where we are today. But we are facing a much more difficult job because we have now social media, the electronic media, which can reach billions of people instantly. And what we put out on that is vital because it changes the thinking of people, the behavior of people. That's why it's very important for us to be able to recognize that this free speech is very, very important for a healthy society. But at the same time, we need to have some guardrails around it. We'll talk about that. So here, just repeating the same thing about how the Neanderthals were, let me just move this thing a bit. Okay. The Neanderthals, basically they lost out, although they were bigger, but because the sapiens were able to group together, they were able to overcome them. And they got together because they had this ability to create a story by telling, let's go plan like this, deal with this, and so on. And have a group action take place against the enemy. So Professor Hariri, in his book The Sapiens, he talks about how this cognitive revolution, which came about because of this ability for narratives, that developed 70,000 years ago, and that is the reason why we are here. Ability to create and believe in shared myths and stories. This is the ability that brought us here today. Otherwise, we would have been wiped out ourselves, because this has enabled us to have large scale cooperation and societal organization. These myths and imagined orders, humans have that as their unique ability. Uh, and that has led to religions and nations and money, institutions and whatever rules that govern the institutions. And that has brought about large groups of people to act in unison practically. And that cooperation is really the basis of our human civilization. So with that, of course, we had the scientific revolution and then, of course, the Enlightenment. Now, let's see what this Enlightenment gave us. Well, Enlightenment gave us something very important. It see, before the Enlightenment, we had the monarch as the absolute ruler, and he controlled the people. And Hobbes was one of the people at that time, and he concurred with that and said, yes, we need a monarch because people essentially are evil. And therefore, we must have somebody who is able to take decisions on our behalf. But then came John Locke. He said, look, that's all right for the monarch and so on, but we need to have protection of our life and property and liberty. And that protection is our inherent right, our birthright. And that right must be protected by a government instead of a monarch, because a monarch does what he wants, but we have to abide by having to give protection to the public. So that's what John Locke said. Montesquieu said, yes, that's a good idea, but what happens if the government itself turns against the people? So we need to have separation of powers. And what he came up with was the executive, which is the government, legislature, which is our parliament, and judiciary, which is our court. So he gave that separation of powers idea. And then Rousseau said, yes, if the government comes in, then how are we going to bring about that understanding? So if you have a social contract, which means every time we have an election of some sort on a manifesto, and therefore we make a contract with the government. If you don't deliver on that, then we're going to throw you out. So that's what Rousseau said. And Voltaire said, okay, we also have to sort of deal with this religion and so on, because that causes a lot of issues. And therefore he said, let's separate the state from the church. And that will give us more tolerance and so on. So these big thinkers of the Enlightenment laid the foundation for our society today. So this free speech, under free speech, we have all this particular type of talk going on. Some for, some against, some good, some bad, also. And we need to be able to sort of assume responsibility for making sure that the society still can bear the freedoms and exist and not collapse under it. And in order to do that, these big thinkers of America, Washington, he said, if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. So this is what he's saying about the freedom of speech. And Jefferson, he says, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. So he says we must have freedom in the press so that we know what's going on. And Benjamin Franklin says, whatever we overthrow, whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freedom of speech. So he says, if you want to take over a country, and then you have to get rid of the freedom of speech, which is what's happening in many countries even today in this world. And Pakistan is a case in point today. Complete total freedom has been taken away, and Imran Khan has been put in jail. More of that later. So how did they sort of introduce that in the Constitution? They said the First Amendment must protect the free speech. which must be there for the press, speech, assemblies, religion, and for making petitions if there are any complaints. So I won't read all of this, but First Amendment of the United States Constitution protects the freedom of speech, religion, and the press, as well as the right to peaceful assembly and petitioning the government for redress of grievances. This means that, in general, individuals are free to express their opinions and beliefs without fear of government censorship or punishment, and so on it goes. So you can see that freedom of speech is absolutely crucial to society. Along comes Musk. He says, look, so much electronic media and civil social media is there, but we don't really have very credible information given to us. You know, the big sort of TV channels and so on, they give a lot of propaganda, a lot of fake news, and they keep in step with the government of the day and their foreign policies and so on. And they never give the whole story. So he says we must have a media which enables us to get both sides of the picture. And he says free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is the digital town square. So with that idea, you know, town square where everybody can voice their opinion, and of course, you know, people will listen to those people who sort of sway them one way or another and follow them, and that is a right of every individual. But according to law, there are certain limits that you can't cross. You can't incite violence. You can't sort of bring in pornography and all that type of stuff, which enables a society to function a bit better. So he bought Twitter, and he says, "I'm going to free Twitter," because Twitter, when he bought, he had government agents in there. Even in the Indian government had put in some people there, and they put in people there in order to suppress information that is against them. In the case of Biden, the Hunter files, his computer and all that, his corruption in Ukraine was suppressed at the time of election. And the case of Modi, the similar type of things there about his uh, uh, policies of divide and rule and being anti-Muslim and so on. So what we have is uh, Elon Musk looking at Twitter and say, look, I'm going to free this bird, get rid of these people, and have uh, X, which he renamed Twitter to X, so that one can get both sides of the story. As in a court, you have the prosecution presenting their case and the defense presenting their case. So we want to have a similar type of setup in social media and electronic media. Both sides of the story must be presented for the public to be able to make a decision. But as it so happens, governments don't allow that. And that is the case of Tucker Carlson's protege that is taking on place because he's gone to Russia to interview Putin. They're saying we don't want Putin's sort of narrative to be presented to our public, which is completely against the First Amendment. First, our right is there to be able to listen to the opposite side. So he's now doing these things to bring about these changes to Twitter so that, you know, the tweets can in fact be presented from both. Because Trump was taken out at the time before it was acquired by Elon Musk. He reinstated Trump because he says, okay, Trump, whatever he says, he will, good things or bad things, let the public decide whether it's acceptable or not. Otherwise, why one is afraid? So long as he's within the law, then it should be allowed. So he reinstated him back. Now, further challenges that are being faced because of the electronic media is technology. Now, we don't have technology now, but we have imitations of human, um, if you like, characteristic being imposed onto electronic media. These bots, they pretend to be human, but they swing the argument to one side or another. And these bots are created artificially by the people who want to sort of sway an argument in their favor. Therefore, it's a big job to try and get rid of the bots, and that's what Elon Musk did. He got rid of the bots when he bought it, and now X is free of bots. So how is he going to moderate these tweets? Well, he's got algorithms which are going to be able to, of course, first of all, flag all those things which are illegal by law, then those which are within the legal framework, but yet can be nuanced in such a way as to targeting a certain minority group or the other. Then these will be also be identified, and then we will have also the fact that these bots will be removed, and then authentication will finally be done by humans, by what he calls the community oversight. So we'll more about that later. Now, this is free speech. It tells us all these things we can do very simply in society, sharing of opinion through open discussion, a way to exchange, teach, learn, and challenge each other's perspectives. We have debates, conversations, education, criticism, and sharing of experience. Now, this is the right of everybody. But we also have this freedom of speech. This hate speech can be also abused. That privilege can be abused by targeting particular groups with malicious intention, insults about individual identity, racism, sexism, homophobia, and all these phobias are there, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. So, in order to be able to sort of keep this under control, one needs to be able to take some steps, and that is the job of moderation. He's opening up a center in Austin, and they will have the uh, IT support, of course, because we're dealing with billions of tweets and so on. So you need to have automatic sorting out of these things to be able to keep a certain amount of things under control, flag them out. Ultimately, if there are those things which are a little bit difficult, then human beings can then decide. But at the end of the day, what this is the steps that they'll be going through. I won't go into all that. It's just the technical stuff. And but sufficiently just to say that the community notes basically means that if the algorithm that selects the tweets uh, picks up all the responses to a particular tweet, then these responses will then be identified to see how many of these uh, are talking sense and so on. And those which are just ranting and so on, they'll be excluded by automatically. And those which are just on the borderline, they'll be looked at by human beings, and they will then have this oversight of the community rather than just an algorithm. Now, who are the people who are purveyors of reliable news in today's context? Now, you've all heard of Julian Assange. Now, he's still in jail simply because he highlighted the US military crimes that were committed in Iraq. So, of course, USA and UK being complicit in US actions is keeping him in jail still. There's Douglas McGregor, who reports on Ukraine war, and he reports much more truthfully as to what's going on, because what you hear on the media generally is all the government propaganda, which says that one is winning the Ukraine war and so on, whereas the real story is that Ukraine has lost 500,000 people killed, soldiers. That is never mentioned. So people like Douglas McGregor, he has very good credentials. He was the former defense advisor and also has war experience and so on, being a colonel. So a very credible source of information for you. And Scott Ritter is also very credible. He was an arms control guy, and he reports on Gaza war, and also he's very credible. And of course, I mentioned Tucker Carlson. His interview is going to be coming out any day now, and all these other media will not put it out because they're already trying to make Tucker Carlson um, have the same sort of status as Assange, and some of them are trying to sanction him. Even Europe says we are going to sanction him simply because he is going to give the other side, which is Putin's side, as to why the war is going on. And this the government in the West doesn't want to put out because they're fighting an absurd and wrong war. And what are the other questions that need to be asked? by journalists, good journalists. Why are there 800 military bases around the world? Is this because the whole world is lawless? No, it's because these 800 bases, they give support to the corrupt leaders in the countries that are there. And these corrupt leaders carry out the wishes of the US and UK and the West in general. Uh, Therefore, you can see that reporting is not done at all, but it's a clear way as to why there is a need for this 800 military bases. If you want to be able to see, and then the US also is complicit in making regime changes. Right now, they're doing this in Pakistan, and they did it about 20 months ago when they removed Imran Khan. You can listen to Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Professor Mashanama. They're both from universities of New York and Chicago. And of course, these are the types of questions that are being suppressed in the West. And if journalists do anything about it, they're blackballed and they are regarded as being sympathetic to the enemy. And then they close the file on that. So basically, it's a very disgraceful state as far as freedom of speech is concerned nowadays with the electronic media and with the social media. Okay, I'm going to stop here and then go for some Q&A. So in conclusion, what I have to say is that we are talking about freedom of speech, and we're talking about the current state of affairs, and we're talking about what hope there is in order to be able to find credible information. And social media is one way that we can find credible information because we don't have the people like Murdoch and people like whoever who control the big TV channels and communications and so on to express their views. But social media, an individual can express their view and can reach a lot of big audience. So X and Twitter, they are able to reach millions of people. And Elon Musk's attempt, because of his background, he is a man with a vision. He's not out there to make big bucks like Bezos or Branson or whoever, but he wants a vision of the world to be able to say humanity must survive, must be able to sort of go beyond the earth, make a multi-planetary species. And so he's got these grand plans. And one of the big things is, of course, to have a media through this X to be reliable enough to entertain both sides of the argument. Like we give the courts all these facilities for presenting both sides of the prosecution and the defense is there. So in the case of media as well, we should have that argument presented. Both sides of the coin must be presented. Both sides of the argument must be presented. But if we are going to suppress the other side, then we know that your side is also corrupted and therefore trying to mislead the people and misguide the people. So his particular vision is very credible, and he's going to deliver on that as he has delivered on so many other of his projects, like on sustainable energy, on Tesla and Starlink, on SpaceX, and Neuralink. Think of it, he's got all the right projects for the benefit of humanity. So I would put some credibility in his attempt to try and do something with X to give us a credible media to be able to at least follow rather than to listen to all of fake news that is doled out by all the national sort of media in most of the countries as we see today. Okay, thank you.
You know,
I didn't put the recording on, unfortunately. All right.
Oh, pity.
If this was the 1930s and we had Twitter, would we give Hitler full access to, would we have given, well, Chairman Mao did have full access because he controlled the media. You know what I mean? It's that old age thing, which is not, again, it's nothing to really, it predates your talk, which is,
well, I think the
what
policy is
what counts as hate speech, and I'm not sure Musk is. I think the way he let people on so easily.
I think what is important is to be able to have, as in our courts, we go and have the prosecution present their case, and the defense presents their case. It's as simple as that. You need to know what the opposite side is saying. But if you don't have that, then all the propaganda gets in there, and that sort of leaves us no choice.
But if it's, say, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, surely philosophically we've got to draw a line somewhere. We're not saying because there's, you know, hopefully relatively small numbers of really vicious Islamophobes and vicious anti-Semites, do they have the right to go on Twitter just because we need to hear their viewpoint, even though 95% of decent society would say that they shouldn't be given a platform?
You see, what it is that anything which is within the law, which is expressed, is acceptable. You can't incite violence, racism, or whatever. I told you about the hate speech items there in one of the slides there. Therefore, what you need to be able to see is the opposite side's argument, not necessarily an incitement or just a rant on the other side, because that gets, in fact, thrown out as being not acceptable.
But the question is which law? For example, the Nuremberg laws were laws. So it's if you say according to law, if it is according to law, then it is all right. Which law? Which country's law?
Well, at the moment, every country has their own law, and then you have the International Court of Criminal Conduct or whatever. But very few people seem to sort of take much notice of what they say. But the individual Supreme Courts, they also get corrupted. Like if you're looking at Pakistan at the moment, the Supreme Court judge is now ruling in absurd type of decision making, neglecting all the rules of law. So you have this abuse taking place, and it's hidden from the public, and therefore he can exercise all that. Therefore, we need to have these types of situations brought up to light so that people know. Otherwise, who is going to challenge them? You see, even the superpower like USA is behind the shenanigans that are going on in Pakistan. And the people in USA are not familiar with it. And therefore, when Tucker Carlson is going to sort of put the case forward, he's going to be put into the jail because he's talking to the opposite side and presenting their case. Now, why shouldn't we listen to the other side? We're not listening to rants because we don't want rants from either one side or the other. We want to see why a person says what he says. And that is the right of everybody.
Leslie.
Well, I'm very reluctant to enter such a debate, but it seems to me that you have virtually sanctified Musk. I mean, I find him an extremely dubious character, and I'm very loath to believe anything he says.
Well, one of the things that you can ask as well is, why do you hold those beliefs? Have you got any information that makes you hold those views?
Yes, I have. I mean, I'm observing his behavior. He's extremely erratic. He jumps from one thing to another. The whole purchase of him acquiring Twitter was very weird anyway. I think he wanted to do it, then he wanted to pull out, and he was finally forced to do it somewhat reluctantly. And then he set about doing all sorts of things which I think are extremely undemocratic and really cast great doubt on the sort of motives that you attribute to him.
Well, I think the way that he has handled Twitter is, first of all, to keep it alive, because, you know, when he came in...
It was alive, but it was alive before. And
yeah, it was alive, but being misused by even the FBI, the US government. In fact, the Hunter Biden's files were suppressed by Twitter at the time of election by the US government. And then the Indian government had people sitting in Twitter not to put out information which is contrary to the Modi government in India. So when you have these type of abuse taking place, then you need to ask the question, why is it that we still need to rely on Twitter when we know these injustices? This came out only after Elon Musk bought and opened up the Twitter files. You might have heard of that. See?
Oh, well.
Can I just quickly, because I feel a bit mean to you, Shafiq, can I praise very much that his desire to get rid of all the bots? I think that's brilliant. And if he makes sure that all the tweets are coming from humans, I think is superb. And I think if he's really genuine about tackling that, I'd give him full praise for that. It's just to counter my negative thoughts.
You see, one thing that you said that I have sanctified him, up to a point, I have more reliance on him than on Bezos or on Branson and so on, who are out there just to make big bucks. He's got a vision. He's got a vision for humanity, and I believe in that. And if you look at his projects,
Sorry, what is his vision for humanity?
sorry.
What is his vision for humanity? I mean,
Well, first of all, let me just very quickly enunciate them. One is to be able to bring in sustainable energy, which he started off by bringing in a complete change to the electric car, to the automotive industry, which can't be a bad thing. He makes us reusable rockets, which means that if a disaster strikes Earth, then you can become a multiplanetary screen. His thinking is very
that
big.
in itself is to me madness, and is completely in opposition to any idea of sustainability. Absolute madness, completely madness, and completely immoral. What's more, absolutely immoral.
You're entitled to hold those views.
Only the very richest would ever be able to afford it. It's completely immoral. It's narcissistic. It's evil. I mean, I think I think Musk is a dreadful person, and I mean, probably Putin is worse, Trump is worse. But
have you heard of his project called Starlink?
I have indeed. I mean, I think the man is.
And what does it do? Can you tell me?
Starlink, I don't know, some sort of satellite.
Well, you don't know much about his projects, do you?
Do you know? I honestly, I am very limited in my knowledge, because I find him an appalling man.
Well, each one to their own thinking.
I absolutely agree with John Dodds that
I'm happy for you to be able to think the way that you do, but not for me.
Yeah, as long as we disagree agreeably. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I think
Probably we'll have to call it off now. I think.
Yeah.
Provoked a lot of interest anyway, Shafiq. Thank you very much for stimulating.
Well, my regret is that I wasn't able to record this.
Yes, exactly.
that is a regret. Yeah.
Yes.
John, how are we for time?
Well, yeah, that's right. We've only got it's gone past. So
yeah. Well.